What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Existential Stoic Podcast, episode 29. I'm Randy with my buddy Danny.
Hey, Randy.
Hey, Danny. And today we are talking about the paradoxes of life.
We are going to talk about the paradoxes of life for 29, is it? Yeah,
What,
that's a lot.
year?
No,
Or how many?
episode. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, episode
No, I was just
29.
saying
Yeah,
that's crazy, right? That's a lot.
we've
So
made it over half a year.
over I know, it's amazing, right? The time flies. I know, I was just
Mm-hmm.
trying to do the math in my head too, and it's confusing sometimes. That's
30
58 though.
minus 1.
I know, it's difficult. It is
There we
difficult.
go.
But anyway, yeah,
Yeah.
so the paradoxes of life and in focus. It's awesome.
Oh, yeah. Camera's working out well. So, do you remember why we wanted to do this episode on paradoxes of life? I know we were talking about something and this came
I
up and it
do.
was just like, ooh.
Yeah, I actually do remember. So it was a few things, right? So one, I think we had mentioned I had mentioned the quote to you. I don't know if it was during an episode or not of Heraclitus, where he says you only can step in the same river once because it's always changing. The waters are always flowing.
Mhm.
And you had talked about the like yin and yang in life, and we were talking
Mm.
about how it's funny how like, and this might not have been in the episode last week. I don't remember, but we were talking about how like it's funny how we all seem to want consistency and stability, but the only fact or reality of life that we know is that it changes, which is
Ooh.
really funny when you think about it, right? Because like the existentialists say, right, like we're thrown into existence. The only thing we know is that we'll die. But I would add to that and say the only other thing we know too is that things change. Nothing's
Mhm.
constant. Nothing is the same. But what's funny is like reason really wants things to be consistent, secure, comfortable, and the same over time, homogenous. You know, it's funny when you look at like Asian philosophies, like Taoism is a good example. The first, little poem of the Tao Te Ching, and this is from memory. It's Tao called Tao is not Tao. Names can name no lasting name. Nameless, the origin of heaven and earth, naming the origin of the 10,000 things. And the 10,000 things is like a stand-in for all particular things, right? Particular stuff, objects. But what's interesting is like when they say names can name no lasting name, it's like we conceptualize, we name things. At least this is how I always understood it. And when we give something a name, we fix it. So like think about ourselves, right? When I call you Randy, I have this idea of you that's fixed over time. But in reality, you're not the same as the little baby I met on the teat back, almost 40 years ago. Nor am I, right? I mean, we look totally different. We are different. We change every day. I mean, if you really get down to, brass tacks, as they say, I mean, and you think of it on a chemical level, on a molecular level, I mean, our bodies are literally different than they were, right? I mean, there's so much changing. I think I was listening to something and they said like our cells in our stomach are like on the stomach lining are only like 4 days old because they're replaced so rapidly. So I mean, if you think of it that way, it's really amazing. But it's this weird idea, this contrast between like, our rationalization, conceptualization of the world, wanting it to be the same, wanting it to be fixed, and then the reality on the other side of that, the other side of that coin. And actually, I was thinking about this today because, in the myth of Sisyphus, Camus says, like, you can't have sun without the night, and he says absurdity and happiness are two sides of the same coin. I think you see this idea over and over again that, we understand on the one hand that life has both these things, both sides of the coin, right? It has the good, it has the bad, but at the same time, we always want it to be consistent, to persist, and to perpetuate in the exact same fashion, which is really funny, right?
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely what we were talking about. And it's so interesting how like on the one hand we want change, but on the other hand we want consistency.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like I see that in my life all the time, how like there are these I want like okay, so I'll get a little bit personal, but
Get
on
personal.
one hand on one hand I want like freedom. Like freedom is a very important value for me.
Oh
But then
yeah.
on the other hand, intimacy is an important value for me. And so they're on opposite ends of the spectrum. So like whenever I'm being the freest, I want intimacy, and whenever like very intimate, I want freedom. And it's just like this constant paradox of finding that golden mean.
You know what's funny though? I think that's a great example, dude, because like, you want that absolute freedom and agency to do exactly what you want, but you also want the connectedness and the intimacy of being really with another person, which is totally contradictory to that. You can't have that. And I think that's also why finding really even just good friends is so difficult. I think that's like why we're so lucky. Like if you I was thinking about this, I was talking to someone the other day, and I was saying, it's really funny if you look at like our friendships only gotten better over the years, but it's really interesting because it's very rare that we're in the same state or country even. I mean, we go long stretches without being able to physically see each other at all. I mean,
Hmm.
and now's an improvement because we have Zoom and all, but like even before then, like it was just the phone, right? I mean, that was
Hmm.
it. So like it's interesting that like even given that, like I think our personalities, whatever, it works very well. We have a very good relationship that worked out, but that's very hard to find even with friends. And then when you talk about significant other, it gets even more impossible, right? It's like very difficult because we all kind of want that. But if you have absolute freedom with your significant other, you're really not a couple and you don't have the intimacy, right? It's like,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely interesting. So I think one paradox that we touched on there was a paradox of change and constancy. I would say another one that I definitely see all over in my life and everything that I do is that if you want if you want life to be easy, you need to do what's hard.
yeah.
Because if you do what's hard, life will be easy. But if you do what's easy, life will be hard. And I see this all the time. Like most particularly, I see it in terms of like exercise. I see it in terms of just general well-being. Like whenever I'm just
Oh,
doing the easy stuff in life, I end up getting depressed and just like losing my focus.
well,
But
that, yeah. Oh, go
when I'm
ahead. I
doing
was
the
gonna say
hard
like,
stuff, yeah,
yeah.
when I'm really like taking charge of life, doing hard stuff, challenging myself every day, that's when life is just easy.
Well, it's no. I think that's another good example, right? We all want things to be easy, but there's no growth with easy. There's no like I remember in college, like is an easy example where like the times I felt the best about my assignments, even if I didn't get like the highest grade, was when they were really hard and I was really proud of the work I did. And that was always when they were the most challenging assignments, right? It's never like if something's super easy and it takes you no time to do it or it takes no effort, it's like, all right, whatever, I did it. Who cares, right? But like when it's really challenging, when it really pushes us, that's where we see growth. That's where we see development. Just like you said, I mean, any personal growth, any exercising, physical health, mental health, all takes this sort of work, but we want it to be simple and easy, right? We want it to be easy rather. And we always miss that idea. It's funny too, because like I remember being younger, hearing stuff like that and just thinking they were like, it's just like a proverb or something. Like, it's not true. That's not how life really is. Like it should be simple or something. But yeah.
Yeah. And you know what's crazy is that like the difficulty never ends. Like with every blessing, there's a burden. And so the difficulty never ends. It just kind of like gets upgraded, you know? You
Yeah,
get better
it's
problems along the road of life.
well, I don't know if it's just better problems too, or you find I think there is an important connection between meaning and purpose and overcoming those challenges, right? Because like Nietzsche says, like, like we would rather will nothing than not will at all. And I always love that idea. It's in Genealogy of Morality. It's the third essay. This idea that, like he talks about how the will needs a goal. It needs something to do, basically. And like willing is all about not only willing some end, but willing the power to overcome the resistances you meet. And I thought a lot about this recently because I was rereading that section. And like when we have a goal that we really are excited about, that we really want to achieve, it imbues all of our actions, all of the intermediary stuff with purpose. It becomes meaningful because it's something we really want. It's working towards something. It's not something somebody told us to do, right? We don't have to do it just because we have to do it. And like, I think in those cases, like even those difficult struggles, burdens, suffering, it's not interpreted that way because it's meaningful, it's purposeful. Like we reinterpret it as like fun, enjoyable, part of the process, part of, we see it differently.
Yeah,
And
it's
I think
such an
that's also
important
part of the paradox, right? Which is we can flip this stuff just by interpreting it differently. And our awareness of the world makes it very interesting, right? That we can change these things just by our attitude or our mindset.
yeah. Yeah, it's definitely such an important point that like the meaning that we create in doing something is so important. Like I know looking from my life at some of the struggles that I've had and like the most difficult things to do to achieve, I value very highly. whereas some things were like very easy for me and I don't really value them. And then there was one time where I got like where I was rewarded very heavily for something that I didn't feel I did much of anything. And like I think I almost self-sabotaged myself in that one area because I'm like, I didn't deserve this. This is crazy.
That's interesting too. The idea of what we deserve, right? Like what we like what because we have this society is very heavily has that like illusion of meritocracy, right? And so that idea of merit and do I deserve it? And this notion of deserving anything is also kind of a paradox because this is life. That doesn't really apply in reality, right? That's all a human construct. But I was thinking about even this idea of paradoxes is funny, right? Because really the world is like a construct that we've created. So it's like the paradoxes are all things we're building into it. I don't know that they're necessarily there, right? It's a problem between our awareness of ourselves, of the world, and then I guess maybe our expectations, what we want, what we hope for, or it's really interesting. I don't know. I keep thinking of them now. I'm thinking of more and more, but like,
Yeah.
the idea
Well,
that like, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, we'll go over them, but like the because we observe the world and we observe the world through our senses, but our senses are us. So the way that I observe the world and the way that you observe the world are completely different because our observation of the world depends upon the individual. So there's no
Yeah.
like objective reality. It's just completely subjective. And potentially because of that, the paradox
Well, then
exists.
think, wait, you want to complicate it further. So it's completely subjective. Even if we assume the sensory data is relatively similar, the interpretation is different. So how you're processing the material that's being given to you or the data is going to be different. So that creates a different standpoint, different perspective. And then add to that the fact that we don't even know ourselves. We generally learn about ourselves through interactions with others. So it's actually through the other that we generally know ourselves. So that even complicates it further because, and I think that's one of the difficulties. It's like, because like in Ortega when he talks about man has no nature, he says at the very one of the very first lines is like a stone in the field is given its existence from the moment it is created, right? It's a stone in the field, but a person has to create themselves every moment because we're conscious entities, we're self-aware. And I think that idea that we don't have a nature, we don't have a defined essence, as Sartre would say, or a defined anything out the gate, and we're always creating ourselves. We're also looking outside of ourselves to understand ourselves and to know ourselves. And that also is kind of a paradox. Like we don't know who we are or what we are. And if you really think about that, it's insane, right? Every other creature, like there's really it's that you ever hear somebody say like when people say either like, I always hear people say that have pets, like they're like, oh, you have such a good life to like their dog or cat, and like kind of like sort of with like a like the kind of tonality and like that idea that like, oh, I wish I was you sometimes, like because it's so
Mm-hmm.
simple. Like you have your basic desires, you could do whatever you want, people buy you shit all the time, like everything's taken care of. Like I think all of us kind of want that in a way, but also don't, right? Because we know also that to what it is to be a human being. So it's like this paradox of like, how do we define ourselves, wanting to be something different, and it's always from the external. It's really interesting.
Yeah, it's like that quote where I'd rather be a human dissatisfied than a pig satisfied.
John
I've
Stuart
always,
Mill. Yeah.
yeah, I've always hated that quote because I'm like, nah, I'd rather be satisfied. Doesn't matter what I am, human or not. But maybe they just can't feel that satisfaction.
Well,
However, looking at a dog,
hold
like
on, hold
looking
on.
at a dog when they're happy. Yeah, go on.
Oh yeah, sorry. So no, I was gonna say it's always better to be or it's better to be dissatisfied Socrates than a satisfied fool. Better to be a dissatisfied human than a satisfied pig. And what Mill means is that like he thinks the animals can only be like contented. They can't be happy. That happiness is something different. It involves higher pleasures, which is like our cognitive faculties and blah, and self-awareness. So like, but I think that's part of it, right? Is that we imagine that that would be better, but we also can't really say because we are who we are. To imagine that is to imagine something so different, right? Like I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah. Well, it's difficult to imagine because how do you know what something else is thinking? Like even a
Yeah,
person, we can kind of guess, but oftentimes we have no idea. So like a different species, how are we supposed to know what's going on there?
dude. I always think that, dude, interpersonal relationships are fucking amazing that they work. I mean, like how we've
Hmm.
known each other for so long, and you're probably like I probably know you probably better than anyone else in my life, right?
Hmm.
And even then,
Yeah,
I would
same.
still say I don't always know what you're thinking. I don't, you know what I mean? It's like sometimes I feel like, we're pretty on point, but like that took a lot of years of experience. Like it's funny, right? It's like very hard to know what other people are thinking, why they do what they do, even their motivations sometimes, even when you know the person, are very hard to pin down.
Hmm.
Sometimes they don't even know though. So it's like even, makes it even worse.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, because there's like contrasting forces pulling us in opposite directions. Yeah.
I think that's what
So
got us on the paradox thing in the first place too, was that whole notion of the like that even like when you were talking about the yin and yang thing, right? Like and like creation, even the world itself seems to be built on this. I mean, if you think about like the whole idea that matter is always recycled, like creation needs destruction, destruction needs creation. We were talking about that idea of like, you know, you can't really know the good without knowing the bad. All these sorts of weird realities or truths for our existence, right? For our awareness.
mhm. Yeah, definitely. So you touched when you were talking earlier, you touched on happiness. And here's another paradox,
Oh,
okay?
oh yeah.
And this is a popular one that I don't think many people know, or at least they don't recognize on a regular basis, and I'm guilty of this too, is that the more you seek happiness, the less happy you are.
Yeah. Yeah, that is always, we talk about that a lot too. Like we're like, you're actually doing something, you're having a great time, you feel great, and then somebody's like, "Hey, are you happy?" And you're like, "Oh, what? No,
I
now
was until you asked.
yeah, now I think I'm missing stuff, and there's things I'm angry about and dissatisfied with." It's really interesting though, man. It's like it's almost, yeah, it is. It's like I always wonder, like how can I like that concept of like authenticity. I think I explained to you before, like where Nietzsche talks about like the Ubermensch and like this idea of knowing yourself so clearly that your actions are almost like instinctual. It's like you do exactly what you're supposed to do, but it's still free, right? And I always imagine that being sort of like those moments where we are really happy and we're like really into something and doing it. And like we haven't been asked the question yet. It hasn't been challenged. It hasn't been brought to our full conscious awareness yet. Because I feel like those are the moments where like it's almost like you feel most alive, if that makes sense. I don't know if that's the way you think about it, but like
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you because it's in those moments you're barely thinking, if at all. You're just like you're living, you're doing, you're in the flow, you're you're just focused on really the present and what that contains, and then and it's just this like this overall feeling of well-being and happiness. Like
well,
you
and,
talk
and
about
it's
the
a, oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
yeah, you talk about the Ubermensch. I think of Zorba the Greek. So there's
Yeah.
this book and also a movie where he talks about the whole catastrophe, how like no matter what's going on in life, the good, the bad, the ugly, uh, you just like you just embrace it, you know? You undo your pants and go looking for trouble. I think that's what he says.
I think that it's true though, right? And it's funny, like whenever I think about that too, it's like, you think of like playing an instrument or playing a sport, like those people that are professionals practice all the time, but when they're actually performing, when they're playing a game, they're not thinking about what they're doing, right? Because if they were thinking, they would screw up. It's like it has to be so, built into your body, into your muscles that you need to do this in this moment, that in that moment to respond to that, that you just like, it's like yeah, it's almost like you're so present that you're out of yourself for a moment, right? Like you're out of yourself in the sense of that conscious self that's always getting in the way. And it's funny
Mm-hmm.
when after you texted me about the episode topic after we had talked about it and all, what I immediately thought of was Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground, where he calls consciousness and especially like being too conscious is a disease. He says it's a thoroughgoing illness, and like in a way it really is because like you know the saying, right? Like don't overthink it, just do it, right? Like where I mean I think that's true for a lot of people where we paralyze ourselves with fear, with imagination, with made up stuff about things we don't even know about, and we prevent ourselves from doing anything, from taking action, from doing the things we want. And it's all because we're overthinking it. And I think that's where consciousness can be this dilemma, right? Where it's like on the one hand it's like it's this amazing thing that we exist in this world in the first place. I mean, really, there's so many paradoxes if you think about it. Because I mean, the fact that we're on this earth, that we even exist, that's even possible, that we're aware. And at the same time, that very awareness that's so interesting, that makes us capable of thinking about life, can also be the greatest hindrance to our life, to our happiness, and to ourselves.
Hmm.
I think that it's amazing, like when
Yeah.
you think about it.
Yeah, and I think because life is somewhat more easy and more comfortable now, we're almost more subject to this thinking disease that causes a lot of issues. Because you see that, like, I know times when I've been depressed, it's like definitely due to overthinking. Like, I'm in a bad mood, and then I'm like, I have to think myself out of this bad mood, and
Yeah.
that's just a terrible way to go.
It's true, right? That's I do the same thing, man, and you end up just making it worse and worse. And what's funny about that claim there too is like you look in the past history, right? You look at like these ancient Greek philosophers and stuff. A lot of them, not all of them. Like Socrates wasn't very wealthy, but a lot of them had like good backgrounds. They had money because basically it was like an affluent thing, right? To dick
Hmm.
around thinking about ethics and virtue and all this other stuff, like you needed free time. But most
Hmm.
people didn't have that. They're trying to live their lives, right? They're trying to make a living. They're trying to put food on the table. They're working who knows how many hours a day, whatever, chiseling out those gigantic stones that they need to get to somewhere for a temple or something. And like, I think nowadays it's like almost like so many people have that time to think because even at work, they don't really, it's not the same kind of like brute physical labor that labor
Hmm.
was for such a long time where you can't really think. It's like
Yeah.
that Sisyphusian labor where you're literally pushing a boulder up a mountain and you have no fucking extra energy to be conscious.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
It's
like,
like it's the difficulty of like having to be somewhere 8 hours a day. Like, even if there's not
yeah.
work for you, I used to hate that when I worked as a vet. I would see all the appointments for the day and then have another like 5 hours left. And I'm like, so what? I just gotta sit here. But
I always had this like, every time I have a job where I have to be there for like 8 hours, I have this overwhelming feeling of dread. Like I'm trapped. Like I
mhm,
much prefer like what I do now. Like it's a lot of stuff at home on my own time because and in a lot of ways that can be harder because you have to be self-motivating and stuff. But like I just don't like it. I hate that feeling. Like it's like because
mhm,
it's like you're selling your time to somebody else and you're never getting an equal payment out of it, right? It's
yeah,
never fair.
yeah. So you were talking about the philosopher kings, and this is one of the reasons that I really like Naval Ravikant, because he's like a modern day philosopher king, or
Yeah.
at least I think he is. He talks about that all the time, how that's like the goal. We all want to be philosopher kings, but it's important first to focus on becoming a king and then a philosopher. So first make a lot of money and then start thinking about a lot of things. And yeah,
I
that
like that. I like that idea. I mean, I think there is truth to that, right? You need that the financial freedom gives you freedom, right? To do what you
mm,
want. I think there is a flip side to that though too, because I think you do need to like in essence start philosophizing a little so that what you're doing is also putting you on the right path and you're self-aware and you have agency essentially, right? That you're doing what you want to do and you're taking responsibility for yourself working towards that. Because I think otherwise you won't ever get there.
mhm.
I think that is
Or
crucial too.
or you might lose yourself in pursuit of money. Like, you
That's the
hear all
other
those
danger.
stories
Yeah.
about the people who get all the money and then they're miserable, they hate their life, they're in terrible health, all of that.
You can win the whole world and lose yourself, right? I think that's in
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
Bible and Kierkegaard, if I remember correctly. But who knows, right? Man, we're doing well today. Gee, look at all these fucking citations that we won't
I know,
cite.
right? Yeah.
Man,
All right,
sounds
so
smart.
other
Anyway,
paradoxes, you got any other paradoxes off the top of your head?
I mean, I think there's like, I think the fundamental thing we're hitting on here is that, like I think just like the title, right? I mean, life is paradox. I think it is. I mean, I think that's the interesting question though, is like if life is change and we want constancy, if we want freedom but we also want intimacy, if we want to be ourselves but we also want community, like all these things that make us human, all these contradictions, all these hypocrisies, I think that's what it means to be a human being, right? I mean, I think that's the funny part. It's like we all live in this world and I think it's interesting, but I think if more of us, I don't know, I forget where I was going with that exactly. I was probably going on a different tangent,
Well,
but, go
let
ahead.
me take that thought. So it reminds me, the first time I heard Life is Paradox was the movie The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, which is like the movie of that book. Um, but I think what you're talking about there, when you were just saying that, is like the paradox of life and death. So like all we know is life, or at least all we can remember is life. But like life only exists because death is impending. Like it's going to happen. It's coming, and that's like our number one fear is the absence of life. So like we are literally living from moment to moment in like in fear of this paradox. It's the only defining quality of our existence.
Well, and it's funny too because the other paradox in that paradox is that if death weren't part of it, if we weren't mortal, life would have way less meaning. What we did would mean pretty much nothing, right? If we were alive forever, indefinitely, if we were immortal, there'd be no purpose to really do anything because you could do everything, right? It's almost like I think that's part of the other challenge of life is like that's part of the difficulty of all these paradoxes is we have to choose what we want. It's like all these paradoxes are really possibility almost, right? It's like life is possibility and we have to choose a direction. We have to choose what we want and we have to decide that. And that's terrifying because we know we'll die. It's like, I think that existentialists like Kierkegaard and stuff call it like the anxiety, right? That anxiety of knowing that every choice really matters and that there is always a choice and there's always a way for you to change things, make them different. And that anxiety of which do I actually choose and which is me, right? And which one represents who I really am and taking that full ownership of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's difficult to oftentimes know what the best choice is. Like I struggle with that on a regular basis. Like, what's the best possible choice? And even like, am I doing the best that I can do? Like that's something that I feel like there's literally no limit to what I can do. So like I always want to do my best, but then I'm like, am I really doing my best? Like, is there another level?
It's funny. It's why I've always loved philosophy and studying religions too, is because it's like we've been wrestling with this question forever. Like, but it's true because like there is like I think most people don't give themselves enough credit in that they don't realize that there is no limit to what you can do. You can literally do anything you want. You just got to decide to do it. But then the other flip side of that is like you have to make a choice because the only way to do something to your best and to do it right is to choose and actually pursue it, right? Make it into something and realize it. And I think, yeah, it's really interesting. Like, I don't know. I think we're almost like nowadays too, I think with the amount of information, the amount of that we're aware of in the world, we're also like paralyzed in a way by the choices.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you think like back in the day, there would like we're aware of so much now and so many possibilities. You can fly to another country in less than a day. I mean, really, when back that could have taken, one, it would have taken like 6 months or a year to travel there, and your risk of dying was fairly high of horrible things. I mean, even
Mm-hmm.
like lack of vitamin C, like so
Yeah.
it wasn't like without its risk. So you definitely had to know what you were doing to do that. But like now I think it's like almost like we have so much opportunity in a way that it is very hard, but we're also aware of so much that needs to be fixed that it's very paralyzing, I think. It's like, yeah, it's interesting. It's very
Yeah, there was
difficult.
actually a book called The Paradox of Choice. I think it's by Barry Schwartz or something like that, where he talks about that, like up to three choices, we can actually make a good decision. But after that, no matter what decision we make, we just regret it.
Yeah. Well, it's because like, it's the old, I mean, it's the difficulty of the counterfactual, right? Like, what if I had done X? Like
Mm-hmm.
imagining another world where I did something different. It's like we're all guilty of this. And I mean, there's times that it's like, when you hear somebody who gets in a car accident or something, or like, if only I left 2 seconds earlier or later. And it's like, yeah, dude, you can do that to yourself all day. The fact is it happened, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like, I mean, yeah, it sucks, but it happened. So now you need to move forward from there. And I think it's true, but that's the problem is that, and I think that fear of regret, that fear of regretting our decision, the fear that we made the wrong decision, that's also tied to our fear of death, right? It's tied to the recognition that this life, no matter how you look at it, it's that's the other paradox, right? Because we have a lot of time, but it's also short and it is finite.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the other
Yeah.
interesting thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, okay. So here's another thing, just in terms of death, like that paradox itself, because
Oh God.
there are all these. all these like spiritual leaders who say like death is the ultimate release. Like imagine that like orgasmic moment, like the best moment of an orgasm, like that is death. So like this amazing moment, but then we're insanely fearful of that thing. There's the paradox itself.
It is, well, and it's also, I think, what it is too, in that sense, it's the not knowing, right? It's that uncertainty. All these religious
Wouldn't
texts.
that would be cool if you could know like definitively when and where. So then you could just go do whatever you want to do, not have to worry about it.
It's funny? I think even if you just knew what happened, like that, is there a transition? Do you get another life? Is there some afterlife after this? Or is it just your body gets eaten by worms and that's it? Like, even just knowing that possibility would make things even easier. Because then it's like, then at least kind of, it gives you some more direction, right? Of what you need to do, maybe. Or what you should be worried about. Like, it's funny. I think that's, I think that's the other interesting thing about being aware, right? We've talked about this a little bit today already, but like, we're self-aware, but the fact is we don't know anything. We know so really I love the existentialists, how they say that, like, the only thing we know is that we'll die. And it's like, yeah, that's pretty true. That's the only thing we know. I mean, Socrates said, right? I know that I know nothing. We don't know anything. And it's amazing that we can even navigate the world. But like, I think that's where all of our fear and stuff stems from, with these possibilities, these paradoxes, is that like, it's that uncertainty. And it's that fear that we are going to die. Life is short. We need to do something with this life, make it fulfilling, make it meaningful, whatever. And there's a lot of pressure there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned another paradox right there, that the more you know, the less you know. Or the more you know, the more you know you don't know. Like I
Yeah.
remember when I first started working as a vet, I I knew a good amount of stuff, but like I barely knew anything.
Yeah.
And then the longer I worked, the more I realized I really didn't know anything. Like I knew a whole bunch of stuff and I was very proficient, but I realized like I I know what the books say, but I literally don't understand why this works or anything like that. So the more you do, yeah, crazy.
I always found that funny because it's like, when you're young and you're in school and it's like regurgitation of facts, you're like, yeah, I could know so much stuff. I could know everything. But literally, it's like, I mean, I remember that in college, like, realized, like, damn, we don't really know anything. Like, all we do is explain things in more detail, but we don't know anything. Like, we're very good at
Mhm.
explaining processes in finer detail, but that's not necessarily knowing it or knowing why or knowing what it's for or anything. Like, it is really interesting. It's funny.
Mhm.
And that's just it, right? It's like, it's almost like, the construct, the idea of the world that we have, the social world, the world we live in, that we provide ourselves, the rational construct is like this imaginary thing that's fixed, that's ideal, that's perfect. But reality is this other thing behind it that's like, that it covers up, right? That's like this mess. And that's where all the paradoxes lie, because these don't fit together.
Mhm.
And it's like our brain wants it to.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe it is just kind of a fault of our brain to think that it should be some other way.
Right?
Yeah, that could very
I
well
like
be.
that. That's an easy solution.
Yeah, right. So,
Just us.
yeah, so we found this list of like 25 paradoxes, and it's pretty interesting. I
It
think
is.
that they nailed a lot of good ones. So we'll kind of go over them and talk about the ones we want to talk about. We'll link to the list in the show notes so you could check it out. But these are some interesting paradoxes. So first one would be, the more you want someone to like you, the less they do.
Actually,
that one
oh, go ahead.
that one's so classic because like there's like nothing that annoys me more than when someone's trying to win, like than when they want me to like them. It's like the least appealing thing ever. I'm like, just go away. Like, leave me alone.
Do you know what I always found funny about that? I always remember when I was like in college and stuff, like my friends that would go out looking to meet someone. And they're like, and they might, some nights they might be successful or whatever, but the thing would always fall apart. And they're like, I don't understand. I'm like, dude, because you're going out looking to impress somebody, meet somebody. I was like, you're making up a character of yourself that there's no way you can maintain that for more than a couple days because it's false. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
that's why it doesn't work. And I think this is like another one of those things, right? It's like when people really want somebody to like them, they don't they're not themselves, and
Yeah.
they're overbearing and they're fake, and you just notice it and you just don't like it, right? It rubs you the wrong way.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it comes across as needy and just like, yeah.
Yeah.
So the next one is the more you need help, the harder it is to get. This is a crazy one because this even comes back from the Bible where they say that like the good will get more and to the weak they'll get even less, something like that along those lines. But
It definitely
I
wasn't
haven't
written
been
that way.
no, no,
Something
they
or
did a
other,
better
but it
they did a better job. But
no, that's all right.
it makes sense. Like it's something that you see all the time. Like I know the times when I needed the most help, it was like, where can I find it? And yeah, it's one of those paradoxes. But then like
Is it
then
Jesus
you
that
get to
says,
a
I help those who help themselves?
yeah, yeah. And like you even look at it in the financial sector. Like you go to a bank, the people who can get loans are the people who don't need
Yeah.
loans. And
Yeah.
it's like the people who need loans can't get one even if they tried. And it's
No,
just
I
like
think that, yeah, I think there's definitely this is an interesting one because there's a lot of stuff that's like societal, cultural, that definitely is part of that. But on the flip side of it, I think too, when we need a lot of help, part of it is we're not helping ourselves at all. So it is harder because you're looking for somebody else to solve the problem entirely, right? And it's like, yeah, it's interesting though.
mhm. Yeah, so here's a good one definitely relating to something that we talk about all the time. The more you fail, the more likely you are to succeed. This one's so true. Like they say that
Uh,
masters fail more times than beginners even try,
well,
you
it
know?
makes sense, right? Because I mean, if you think about it, the more you fail means the more you're doing. It means the more you're trying, the more you're practicing, the more you're putting yourself out there, and the less afraid you are of failing, right? So you're more
Mhm.
willing to go into it with confidence and like, hey, why not? Who cares if I fail? It doesn't matter. And it's all a learning experience. So you will succeed, you know? I
Mhm.
think people forget that it's like when it comes to like, especially like trying to make ourselves better or better ourselves in the world, it's just like the more we do, we're guaranteed success if we just keep trying, keep going out there. Yeah. I like that one.
Yeah, yeah, there's this saying if you want to succeed, fail faster.
Yeah.
Um, next one, you touched on this earlier. The more the more you know you don't know. Yeah, we just spoke about that one. But that's a pretty
Good one.
crazy paradox. Oh, how about this one? This one, ugh. Yeah, what you resist persists. Like all those things in your life you just want to get rid of, and it just stays there because you're resisting it.
Yeah, I always wondered if that's because like when you're in like a really negative attitude, you keep reinforcing it. It's like because when your resistance is a constant also recognition of it and sort of like validation of it almost, right? Rather than letting it pass. It's like, it's you're not bending with it or moving with the current. You're trying to stand against the current so you notice the current all the time. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, there was this book that I read that talked about pendulums in life and how like, basically like everything is a pendulum. And so it has like the good and the bad, the positive and the negative. And so by resisting it, we're like pushing into the negative or the not side of it. And so it ends up giving that way more strength. And it just keeps the pendulum swinging back and forth. The book was called Reality Transurfing. But like
Oh, huh.
yeah, so like there's the wanting it and there's the not wanting it. And those are both sides of the pendulum. And so anything other than kind of like indifference or acceptance, which would be in the middle, just keeps that thing going back and forth.
That's funny. That's like the golden mean for Aristotle, right? Between the extremes. And
Mm-hmm.
I heard that once referenced the pendulum reference with cultural things in society, like cultural norms and stuff. That when there's a shift in cultural norms, usually there's an overcorrection first. So
Mm-hmm.
like, and then the pendulum, and then eventually it'll even out to the middle. So like, if it, whatever the issue is, right? It'll swing way too far to overcorrect, and then then we'll get to the middle. Yeah,
Yeah, definitely. Oh, this one we spoke about. The search
yeah.
for happiness is the cause of unhappiness. Next one would be people ask questions, but they don't want the answers. How, yeah,
You
right?
know what I
How
like?
often does this? Mhm.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, how often does this happen where like somebody will ask something, you tell them the answer, and then they just ignore it?
Well, it's funny too. I think this speaks to the idea like so much of us don't even want the truth, right? we want our convenient fictions. We don't want the truth. So like we ask for questions, but we really just want our bullshit reinforced. That's all we
Hmm.
really want. I mean, it's so true
Hmm.
anymore.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and like especially with search algorithms and stuff like that, how we just want the answer that conforms to whatever we want. It's so hard. It's so hard to like observe stuff from a different point of view. There,
Well, oh, go ahead.
I remember
Sorry.
this. I remember this saying that like you could tell that someone's learned by their ability to hold two contrasting points of view, and or something along those lines. And it's like that's one of the most difficult things I find for myself is like recognizing other points of views. Like I'm convinced that the way I see things is right, and I'll be the first to admit that. But like I try and see other points of view, and it's like really difficult.
Yeah, when like when Nietzsche talks that it's I think that's true though in terms of like wisdom, being able to hold multiple different points of view at the same time because it is hard. Like Nietzsche talks about with his perspectivism, he talks about like, understanding things is a matter of understanding multiple perspectives, ways that human beings look at it. Because the more standpoints you know, the more you understand that thing in relation to humans, how we see it. But it's a difficult thing to do, man. It's really hard because it's hard to break out of that idea that the world is only from our perspective and no one else's, right? That we're like the center of the show kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention we can't really get in anybody else's head, so it doesn't really make it that easy either to fully
Yeah.
grasp what it is.
Yeah, and like our limited perspective. Like I just recognize this looking at the world behind you and all those galaxies, like our totally limited perspective. We live in this teeny little world that's just like a teeny little bit of this giant Earth that's really just a teeny little bit of this giant universe.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
it's I wish people like looked at the sky more and thought about what it meant. Because when you do that, you realize like, holy cow, all the shit that I worry about is so small. It's so impossibly small. It's ridiculous. It's
Yeah.
like, it's insane.
Well, like the industrial revolution, like we look at that kind of as like the last technological innovation. Well, so then we had the internet revolution. Right now, we have the time of the space barons. We have
Yeah,
Elon Musk with SpaceX and
yeah,
Jeff Bezos with Blue Origin. And so, like, the same thing that happened then with the railroads is happening right now with space travel. And it's just like, yikes.
yeah. It's
Where's
gonna be
that
insane.
going?
Yeah, it's gonna be crazy. I always wish it would be like Futurama, where like I jump in a spaceship and travel. And you know what I mean? I would love that. It'd be so amazing, absolutely amazing.
Right. So the next one is everyone wants everyone else to change, but they don't want to change themselves. Right.
That is so true. Oh my God, that's like everyone on the internet.
Dude, and politics especially.
Yeah.
They're like,
Oh
everybody
God.
else needs to change to my standard. See, I've always been a big fan of that quote by Gandhi that's like, be the change you want to see in the world. Because it's like, unless you can embody it yourself, there's no way you're going to convince anyone else to do anything. So you might as
We
well just live the life
what I
that
loved
you
about
want.
that quote too is like, I mean, first of all, you think what Gandhi went through, but secondly, it's also like, look, you don't really have any right to bitch either unless you're putting out something out there that's valuable, right? And
Yeah.
unless you can stand behind, what you're saying. And most of the
Mm.
people don't stand behind it. They just say it. They
No.
just throw it out there, right? It's just like constant.
Yeah. So the next one would be everyone values honesty, but no one wants to tell the truth. This is a tough one, dude. Telling the truth can be insanely difficult. There was actually, I'm reminded of this story of back in like the 70s when they made LSD illegal. There was one of these communes in Virginia, and they practiced radical honesty. So just completely telling the truth about everything. And they found that that was as like psychedelic as LSD, just
Well,
telling the
dude,
truth.
yeah, think about it. Think about all the time somebody's invited you somewhere and you don't want to go because you don't like their family, you don't like the food, you don't like all these things, but you say, I don't have time or whatever, right? It's like we are so accustomed to using lies as a way to preserve feeling and also just a way to make it easier to get around things, right? Because we don't want to deal with it or we're timid or whatever. And it's like, yeah, telling the truth, it's amazing. I think that's why honesty is so difficult because it's like even with ourselves, because we're so used to lying, we lie to ourselves all the time. So it's like
Mm,
there is that is interesting, right? It's like we even do
yeah.
it to ourselves.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. Next one is everyone has double standards. I don't know if that's a paradox, but The
Yeah, I
one
don't know if
after
there's a
that,
paradox.
the one after that, the future keeps getting better, but we often fear it. I think this is like an important one. Like we literally live in the best world that's like pretty much the best the world has ever existed. Like I get it, there's a lot of issues right now, but this is, I mean, for the most part, most people can be pretty secure in living a nice, long, healthy, safe life. Uh, the world just, I mean, with the capacity for destruction that we have as human beings, the mere fact that we haven't torn each other apart or blown each other up, it's like a miracle. Like we literally are
Yeah.
the apex creature and we've won.
We can
Simple as
change our
that.
environment so dramatically in such major, we can stop rivers and divert them, dude. It's insane. And you know what's funny about this? I think if more people kept this in mind that the future keeps getting better, but we often fear it, we would solve a lot of those social problems too. I think we don't because we have this idea, we have these like contradictory ideas about now and like that we got to fix now. We never are forward looking long term. And if we
Mhm.
thought that way, I think we would get around a lot. We'd solve these problems because we realize like a lot of stuff we're worried about doesn't matter right now. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Like there's a saying, it doesn't matter where you are or where you were as much as where you're going. And
yeah,
like just being able to see that literally anywhere we want, we can get there.
it's a good one.
Here's one. Vulnerability is attractive. Everybody thinks that it's not, but like I've done all these new age workshops and they always focus on vulnerability and how that's such like a strong quality, but it's kind of
Well, you know,
true.
I think for the longest time, right, it was associated with weakness because, like, you know, especially I imagine, right, if you're, you know, hunter gatherers and stuff, and you're dealing with that kind of environment, you don't want to be too vulnerable. You want to be strong and you want to hide
Hmm.
stuff. But yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's like I think because vulnerability though is also truth. It's also honesty in a certain sense. So it's
Mm,
like, yeah,
yeah,
that's a good one though. It's interesting.
definitely. So this one we touched on. The only constant is change. Uh,
It's so true. I mean, I think that's just the basic truth.
mhm. The next one is you cannot not communicate. And
I
this,
like, yeah.
yeah, because like they say the communication is mostly nonverbal, anyways.
Oh, dude, it's everything we do says something. And I think people don't really realize this. Literally, like, it's not the words that we say, but everything we do tells the world something about us and also tells something. It really can, we can learn something about ourselves, even like our, you know, we talked about this before, our physiology, our feelings, our responses to things. It's amazing. Like, yeah.
You might even say actions speak louder than words.
Oh, nice. This next one.
Which is the next one on the list. Uh, okay, here's a great one, and this is shared by a lot of inventors. Is our best ideas come when we're doing something else? Like they say that the best ideas come in the shower, and it's not because there's something magical about the shower. It's just because it gives us time to think.
Well, yeah, you know what? I always thought like whenever I was struggling with a difficult idea like writing and stuff, I always go away from the project, shower, take a walk, or just like sleep, and your brain like still works on it. I know it has to, right? Because like then you always get these breakthroughs and that's it. Yeah, it's kind of cool though how that works. Like you
Mm-hmm.
think you would need to focus more, but actually you need to distract yourself and let yourself process.
Next one is we don't learn from history, and
Yeah, we
and
don't.
here's
Definitely don't.
and it comes with a great quote by George Wilhelm Frederick Hegel. The quote is, "The only thing we learn from history is that we learn nothing from history."
That's awesome. That is a good quote, but it's so true. We never learn. It's like we've been on repeat since the dawn of, since like the first family formed a community.
Hmm.
We've been repeating the
Over and
same
over and
bullshit.
over again. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess that kind of reiterates the idea that life is kind of a spiral. It's not like a circle or anything like that, or it's not a straight line. It just kind of spirals the same problems over and over, just kind of on a higher plane. But
Yeah.
even like, you know, yeah, we really don't learn from history. This one goes along with the communication thing. Not making a decision is a decision in itself.
What? Yeah, also it is, right? Because not choosing A is still choosing. You're still doing something. I wish more people thought about this because when it comes to responsibility and agency, you know, you're still responsible for what you don't do too. It's like we always forget this, that's also a choice. We
Yeah.
always think the positive actions, not the negative ones, so to say.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like decision comes from the same Latin root as incision, which is to cut off. And so basically, like anytime you have a decision, that's like a point in your life where you're basically cutting off one route that you could go.
Yeah.
And they talk about this in Think and Grow Rich, how decision is like indecision is one of the biggest qualities of failures is indecision. And the really big successes make decisions quickly and then change them very slowly. So they talk
Wait,
about Henry Ford in this, where he, was able to come to decisions quickly, and he would change very, very slowly. Like his Model T, he was like, people can have it in any color they want as long as that color is black. And
yeah.
and they like kept the model the same for so long because he would not change his decision. Some people said he was obstinate, but he was just like so slow to change his decision. And I think that was kind of beneficial because it gives it time to develop and to really come to fruition.
What also makes sense too, because you're not rushing through things, so you get time to work on it. But that also goes hand in hand with that idea that a lot of failures equal success too, right? That the greatest successes have failed a bunch because you keep trying things too. You're taking action, you're doing things, and you're getting behind it basically, right? I think that's so important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the next one is there is no there. There. This is like, I mean, another way of saying this is like wherever you go, there you are.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It's like, and also the whole idea of like, when I get this new house, I'll be happy. When I get that car, I'll be happy. When I get that job or that partner, then I'll be happy.
We
That whole
talked about
idea
that
of
so
there.
much. Yeah. And I think that's a great point because like that idea of like we're thinking in the future as if it's something, but it's not there. Like, because you'll be the same person when you get there if you don't do anything else.
Yeah. You're going to carry you with you. Oh, here's a good one. You don't know what you got till it's gone.
Ooh, that is a good one.
Uh-huh. Yep.
We recognize that. It's funny. I say this because we had lost a pet. You were there, right? Not that long. But it's funny. I always notice
Dang.
that, like with pets, for instance, like you lose a pet, and then like all the things you thought annoyed them about you, like you find out like you got fond memories of and stuff, and you reflect on like happily because like you didn't know what you had until it's gone, right? You miss it now that it's no longer part of your life. I always
Hmm.
like that because it's so true. I think it's about being really more present, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like those annoyances, they you were very present while they were there, and then when they're not there, you notice that they're not there anymore, and it's kind of like feels lacking. Yeah,
It does. That's a
definitely.
good list, though. I like it.
Yeah. And then wait, is that, oh, that's all of them. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
And then there's, if oh well, but wait, there's 5 philosophical paradoxes to think about. We have to go through this because this is like a philosophy type
All right, let's do it.
podcast. Okay. If everything is possible, then it must be possible for something to be impossible.
That is a good one, isn't it?
Oh, that's a conundrum.
It
If
is.
everything is possible. Oh my goodness. Then
These have been thought about
yeah,
a lot of these. If these are what I'm thinking of, all of them, I will say they've probably been thought about a lot, and they're difficult to get to as a resolution. You know what I
yeah,
mean? But it's true, right? If
yeah,
everything's possible, then impossibility has to be a possibility because it's just
yeah,
another possibility.
yeah. So if you remember a long time ago, like probably like 10, 15 years ago, there was a Nike commercial that's like nothing is impossible.
Yeah.
So at that time, I was working as an English teacher in France. I was teaching English at a high school, and I
Oh man, it's
remember,
way back. Yeah.
yeah, I remember the French teacher that I was working with. I was asking for some time off to go visit some friends or something, and she was like, "Impossible," and I was like thinking of that commercial. I was like, "Rien, rien est impossible." Like nothing is impossible, and she got so pissed, like absolutely pissed at that. She like
Impossible.
stormed off. Yeah, she
Nothing's
stormed off.
impossible. Give me the time off. You can
Yeah,
figure it out. Hey, it's true though. Nothing is.
yeah. So okay, the next one is if there's an exception to every rule, then even that rule must have an exception. Hmm.
That is true. You know what's funny? Okay, I will say this. A lot of these philosophical ones I've always found funny because I find a lot of them are also very like semantical. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
In a way,
Yeah.
but like, but anyway, Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Uh, it's like this statement is false.
Yeah.
Like that type of thing. Okay, the
Yeah,
next one
right.
is break all the rules. To obey this rule, you must to obey this rule, you must not break it or obey it. Yeah.
Yeah.
There
Well,
are
it's
no
like,
rules. Is that a rule? Yeah.
yeah, it's like when people say like, when Nietzsche says like all truth is conditional, so there's no objective truth, but that's a truth. So that's a true claim, right? But it's like, okay, well, what are we talking about? I think that sometimes it's like a matter of like how you're talking about our perspective, whatever. But yeah, it's interesting though.
Mm-hmm. And then we said there are no rules. Is that a rule? And then the
Oh yeah,
sentence after this is true. The sentence before this is false. The sentence before this is true. Yeah, it's like that. This statement is false.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
They're
we will
logical
share
like
that.
paradoxes.
Yeah. So we'll share that list with you down in the show notes so you can find it out. We've
It's a
talked a lot
good
about
list though too.
paradox.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, that's a
good.
great one. It's a lot of stuff to think about. Like the paradoxes of life definitely give you something worth thinking about.
Well, I think with all the paradoxes we mentioned to this episode, especially when we were talking about them, I think the important thing to keep in mind too is like when you think about these paradoxes, you also start to learn more about yourself and the importance of just acting and taking control of your life because it is all possibility and we need to do something with it, right? We need to be agents. I think that's important. So yeah, it was a good episode,
Hmm.
man.
Yeah.
Good topic.
Anything else you would like to add about paradoxes? I'm going to give it a second while I think about any paradox stuff that I would like to add. Oh, here's one. Okay.
Hit me.
Um, being generous is one of the most selfish things you can do. Okay.
I
So,
okay.
because like being generous is good for yourself, like you feel good after being generous. It's like probably this evolutionarily beneficial thing where being generous became beneficial, so it would be reinforced and rewarded. But like, I mean,
I
I
think it
know
goes
that.
back to they did studies about Neanderthals. I remember that the ones that were in communities, they lived to be like 50 or something because they had others to help them. And effectively, that's like generosity, right? Is when you can help others, you can better the community, better those around you through your efforts or whatever. It's like we all benefit in a way, but you benefit a lot too because you feel better, you gain prestige, power, whatever, recognition. I mean, so it is. Yeah, it's interesting. It's very
Yeah,
selfish in a way too. Yeah,
yeah,
it's a good
it's
one.
like super selfish, but it's also not at all.
Yeah, nice.
Okay, that's mine. Anything else from you?
No, I think I'm good. There's a lot of
Okay, well,
paradoxes, a lot of
yeah,
contradictions.
definitely. Definitely. Well, thank you guys for joining us for episode 29, the
Woo!
last one before 30 of the
Yeah,
Existential Stoic podcast.
two
Uh,
before six.
if
Oh
you
no,
did
anyway.
enjoy this content, make sure to share it with your friends. Also, like, subscribe. If you're listening on a podcast, come join us over on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, come download us on a podcast. We're on Apple and Spotify and all this fun stuff.
We're on like all
Uh,
of them. Yeah.
all of them. We will catch you next week for another full length episode. But in the middle of the week, make sure to come join us for a quick fix, a quick little 10-minute topic. This week, communicating more clearly, methinks.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it's what was it? Was it? Hold on. It's
Yeah,
yeah, communicating more clearly. Dead on. Nice.
perfect. Perfect. Well, thanks again. We will see you next week. Have a good one. All right. Later, Danny.
Later, Andy. Peace.